World's most dangerous prisons. Crime never sleeps. They say monsters don't exist, but they've never heard a man scream through 6 inches of reinforced glass. They've never smelled a cell where blood dried on the walls 20 years ago, and they've never stood inside a place where every inmate has killed and is willing to kill again. Tonight, we step into the world's deadliest prisons, places so violent that guard patrol with riot shields, not clipboards, where the difference between life and death is one wrong look, and where crime truly never sleeps. This is the story of the prisons humanity built to contain its worst nightmares, and the ones that failed. Welcome to world's most dangerous prisons. Crime never sleeps. Like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to see, most people will never dare watch to the end. The night the lights went out. Imagine a prison so overcrowded that inmates sleep in shifts. Not cells, shifts. 3 men sharing 1 bed, rotating like a factory schedule. Now imagine the power goes out. That's exactly what happened at Carandiru Penitentiary, Brazil, once called the slaughterhouse. It held over 7,000 prisoners in a space built for 3,000. On October 2nd, 1992, the darkness became a battlefield. A riot exploded between rival factions. Knives, sharpened toothbrushes, broken pipes. Guards refused to enter. When they finally did, armed, angry, and out of patience, 111 inmates lay dead. Most were shot at close range. Carandiru wasn't a prison. It was a warning. When crime never sleeps, neither does death. But Brazil was only the beginning. Hell on an island. Off the coast of Papua New Guinea sits a patch of land tourists never visit. Bomana maximum security prison. It looks quiet, but inside, the air is thick with humidity, roaches, and the smell of bodies sweating in fear. Bomana houses the region's most violent criminals. Murderers, warlords, cannibals. Yes, cannibals. On this island, tribal violence didn't stay outside the prison walls. It followed the inmates inside, where rival tribes continued century-old feuds using whatever weapons they could carve, twist, or steal. One guard once admitted, "Every morning, we expect to find someone dead. If we don't, it's a miracle." Bomana proves something terrifying. You can trap a man behind bars, but you can't trap the violence inside his head. The prison that eats men alive. Welcome to Black Dolphin Prison, Russia. The cold hits you first, then the silence, then the feeling that something is very, very wrong here. Inmates, all serial killers, terrorists, or mass murderers, are forced to walk bent at the waist. They are never allowed to look up, never allowed to see another inmate's face, never allowed to know what time it is. Guard wear gas masks during inspections. Why? Because inmates have been known to spit acid mixtures made from cleaning chemicals to blind them. Every prisoner here is killed. Many killed multiple people. One inmate confessed to eating parts of his victims. Not for ritual, not for hunger, for pleasure. Black Dolphin doesn't rehabilitate people. It breaks them. Slowly. Completely. And if you think this is the worst prison in Russia, you are very wrong. Welcome to the death factory. Some prisons kill with violence. Some kill with neglect. But Tadmur military prison in Syria, it kills with intention. Interrogation rooms where the lights never switch off. Whips soaked in salt water. Prisoners forced to beat other prisoners, while guards watch and bet on who will die first. Inmates reported executions so routine, they could tell the day of the week by the screams. And the most terrifying part? Not the torture, not the cruelty, not the mass graves. The terrifying part is how easy it is to disappear there. One moment you exist. The next, your name is erased. Crime never sleeps. But in Tadmur, neither does suffering. The gang city behind the walls. Now we travel to El Salvador, home of one of the most feared gangs on earth. MS-13. Inside Quezaltepeque prison, the gangs run everything. Food, drugs, weapons, even the guard safety. The prison is a city, a lawless society, a world where MS-13 tattoos aren't ink, they're armor. An American journalist once called it a self-governing criminal nation. Inside, the gang leaders broadcast messages to their soldiers on the outside. Hits are ordered from inside cells. Rivals vanish. Money flows. Blood flows faster. Quezaltepeque isn't just dangerous. It's proof that sometimes locking criminals up doesn't stop them. It concentrates them. And when you concentrate violence, it mutates. The prison that turned into a kingdom. In most prisons, guards control the inmates. But in the new Bilibid prison in the Philippines, the inmates controlled everything. Imagine entering a maximum security prison, and the first thing you see is a man selling ice cream. Not a joke, not a mistake. Inside Bilibid, the imprisoned drug lords built an empire. Not inside hidden rooms, openly, the way kings rule castles. There were restaurants, recording studios, concert stages, even a full-size boxing ring where inmates held paid matches. The guards? Merely background characters. But the darkest part wasn't the corruption. It was the power. Drug lords lived in private villas equipped with flat-screen TVs, air conditioning, hot tubs, and yes, secret tunnels. One inmate even kept exotic animals, including a python. And while the world saw Bilibid as a prison, the bosses inside saw it as an opportunity. From behind bars, they ran international crime operations, shipped drugs across oceans, ordered assassinations, controlled millions in cash flow. A prison transformed into a kingdom. But kingdoms eventually fall. And when the government finally conducted a raid in 2014, what they discovered shocked the entire country. Stashes of assault rifles, methamphetamine labs, luxury gadgets, a secret nightclub, and a handwritten list of politicians on the payroll. Crime never sleeps. In Bilibid, it lived like royalty. When the walls turn red, we travel now to Ecuador, a nation struggling with a violent surge unlike anything in its history. Inside Littoral Penitentiary, two rival gangs, Los Caneros and Los Lobos, turned the prison into a war zone. Not a fight, not a riot, a war. It started with a single assassination. One gang boss knifed in the courtyard. One moment of violence that set off a chain reaction the world wasn't prepared to see. As night fell, inmates breached armories, seized guns, and stormed rival blocks. Guards hid. Police refused to enter. By sunrise, the massacre was so brutal that investigators couldn't identify bodies. Some were burned, others dismembered. Several were found decapitated. The prison courtyard littered with the remains of battle no one won. This wasn't a correctional facility. It was a battlefield. And yet the violence didn't end. A month later, it happened again. A third time. A fourth. Each riot more violent, more gruesome, more chaotic than the last. In one incident, drones dropped explosives onto rival gang members inside the yard, turning inmates into soldiers and prisons into combat zones. Littoral revealed something terrifying. When street gangs evolve into paramilitary forces, a prison becomes a war front. Crime never sleeps, because the war never ends. The prison ruled by shadows. In the heart of West Africa lies Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison, Zimbabwe, a concrete labyrinth surrounded by silence. But it's what's inside that fuels its legend. Chikurubi isn't just known for violence or starvation. It's known for something even darker. Witchcraft. Inmates claim the prison is haunted by the spirits of those who died from beatings, disease, or torture. Some prisoners refuse to sleep near certain walls, believing the dead whisper through the cracks. One inmate reported waking up with scratches across his chest. Another swore he saw a shadow walk across his cell, despite no guard passing. But superstition isn't the scariest part. The inmates and some guards openly practice rituals. Prisoners draw symbols with ash and blood. They chant at midnight. They summon spirits believed to protect them or curse enemies. A former guard once confessed, "We fear them more at night than during the day." You take a man's freedom, not his beliefs. Violence mixes with mysticism. Knife fights erupt after rituals. Inmates blame deaths on curses instead of blades. Power flows through superstition, and superstition becomes law. Chikurubi proves that in some prisons, fear doesn't come from the inmates, but from the unseen forces they believe guide them. The deadliest women's prison on earth. Women's prisons rarely make headlines, but La Mesa Women's Prison in Mexico is the exception. To outsiders, it's just another overcrowded facility. Inside, it's a pressure cooker of cartel queens, assassins, drug couriers, and women raised in violence. These aren't passive prisoners. Many grew up in cartels. Many ordered hits. Some committed crimes more brutal than their male counterparts. La Mesa exploded in 2008. A fight between rival groups escalated into a deadly riot. Fire, gunfire, screaming. When order was restored, 30 women were dead, and the reason was chilling. Cartel loyalties don't break in prison. They intensify. Women loyal to the Sinaloa cartel fought women tied to the Tijuana cartel, not with fists, with smuggled pistols and homemade blades. One inmate, known only as La Viuda Negra, the Black Widow, was rumored to have killed 3 rivals in the chaos. Her weapon? A sharpened hairbrush. La Mesa forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Violence is not male. Crime is not male. Fear is not male. Even behind bars, the deadliest criminals don't stop. They just adapt, because crime never sleeps. The prison with no escape, but one man begged to leave. Welcome to Qincheng Prison, China, a place built for political prisoners, a place where you don't serve time. You disappear. Most prisons scare inmates with violence. Qincheng scares them with silence. Prisoners live alone. They see no one. They hear nothing except their own breathing. Lights remain on 24/7. Food is delivered silently. There are no riots, no gangs, no noise, just isolation. One inmate, a former intelligence officer, reportedly begged guards to let him work in the fields with regular criminals. Not because he wanted freedom, because he wanted human contact. Any contact. His request was denied. Qincheng shows another form of danger. Not knives, not guns, but the human mind turning against itself. When crime never sleeps, loneliness becomes its own torture. Inside the Supermax where time stops. If there is one place on earth that crushes a human soul without ever laying a finger on it, it's a Supermax prison. And no Supermax is more feared than Caraja's Unit 9, deep in the Brazilian interior, a concrete fortress built to cage the most violent men in South America. Unit 9's design is simple. No windows, no open yard, no recreation, no conversation, no time. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in their cells. The remaining hour alone in a hollowed-out exercise pit sealed by steel doors. No sunlight, no sky. Just fluorescent lights buzzing like angry insects. Guards call it the place where time dies. One inmate, a former cartel assassin, said after his release for medical reasons, "In Unit 9, you don't dream at night. You dream while you are awake, because your brain will do anything to escape." Some inmates punch walls until they break their knuckles. Others whisper to imaginary people. Some try to dig into the concrete with spoons, not to escape, but to feel like they still have control over something. In Unit 9, crime doesn't sleep. It rots. Slowly, but never completely. Because, as every guard will tell you, a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous animal on earth. The African prison where time doesn't exist. On the outskirts of Kampala, Uganda, lies a prison that seems frozen in another century. Luzira Maximum Security Prison. Luzira isn't the bloodiest prison. It isn't the loudest. It isn't even the most overcrowded. No, Luzira is something different. It is forgotten. Inmates wait not months for trial, but years, sometimes decades. There are men inside Luzira who were arrested at 20 and are still waiting for their first court date at 50. 50, one former inmate revealed. In Luzira, we don't count years. We count presidents. Some men inside have lived under 3 presidents without ever seeing a judge. The cells are bare. The food, watery porridge and beans. The medical care, nearly non-existent. The silence, oppressive. But the most dangerous part? The hopelessness. A man who believes he may never leave prison becomes unpredictable. Some lose their minds. Some become violent. Some simply stop speaking. In Luzira, crime never sleeps for one reason. The system doesn't move. And when justice stops working, the world inside the walls becomes a nightmare that never ends. The escapes that shouldn't have been possible. Some prisons are dangerous because violence rules them, others because corruption runs through their foundations. And then there are prisons where danger comes from one thing: men who refuse to stay inside. This chapter is about the escape attempts that should have been impossible, but happened anyway. The Tunnel of 1,000 Hands. Mexico. In Altiplano, the most secure prison in Mexico, guards believed nobody could escape until one man dug a 1.5-kilometer tunnel under his shower. El Chapo. The tunnel had heavy checkmark ventilation, heavy checkmark lights, heavy checkmark a motorcycle on rails, heavy checkmark construction engineered from the outside. It was so precise, so accurate, so perfectly aligned to his cell, that experts said this was not an escape. This was construction on an industrial level. If a prison can't keep a man inside when he's watched 24/7, what does that say about the rest of the world? The man who ran through bullets. South Africa. In Supermax Pretoria, inmate Ananias Mate did the impossible. He slipped out of his cell window, greased his body with petroleum jelly, knocked out a guard, stole his uniform, and walked out prison. A prisoner so dangerous that guards weren't allowed near him without shields, escaped wearing one of their shirts. When he was recaptured, they placed him in a special cell. He escaped again. Some men don't fear prisons. They study them. The prison break led by a ghost. Indonesia. In Carabacan prison, Bali, guards swear a man escaped, even though 3 cameras showed him sitting in his cell at the exact same time. When the cell was opened, he was gone. No tunnel, no broken bars, no signs of forced exit. To this day, no one knows how he escaped, only that he boarded a boat hours later and vanished. Some call him the ghost of Carabacan. Others believe guards helped him. Whatever the truth, his escape became legend, because danger isn't always knives and riots. Sometimes it's the minds of the men inside, the ones who treat the prison not as a punishment, but as a puzzle, the dark experiment. Some prisons are merely holding cells. Others become laboratories. Deep inside H Unit, Southeast Asia, human rights investigators uncovered something horrifying. A secret program designed to reform violent offenders by breaking their psychological resistance. Prisoners were placed in soundproof rooms, not for one day, not 2, but for weeks. Lights dimmed for 18 hours. Temperature dropped to near freezing. Meals delivered without human interaction. No speaking. No movement. No stimulation. The program was called Project Ghost, and the goal was simple: create total compliance. One guard leaked what he saw. Men entered those rooms angry. They left like shadows. Empty, silent, broken. Project Ghost was eventually shut down. Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. Some prisoners lost their memories. Others forgot their own names. One refused to speak for 6 months after release. This chapter reveals a terrifying truth. A prison doesn't need violence to be dangerous. It just needs control. And the most dangerous prisons are the ones that control the mind. Final descent. Why crime never sleeps. Every prison we've seen so far, every riot, every torture chamber, every escape, points toward truth humanity keeps trying to deny. Crime is not a moment. Crime is a cycle. And cycles don't sleep. To understand why the world's most dangerous prisons exist, you have to go deeper, beyond the walls, beyond the cells, into the forces that built them. This chapter takes us into the heart of darkness, not the violence itself, but the forces that feed it. Because in these prisons, crime doesn't simply survive. It evolves. The economy of fear. Dangerous prisons aren't accidents. They're business models. Every violent prison in the world earns someone money. Heavy checkmark corrupt officials. Heavy checkmark gangs. Heavy checkmark private corporations. Heavy checkmark smugglers. Heavy checkmark guards looking for extra income. Heavy checkmark politicians capitalizing on chaos. Fear becomes a currency. Take Venezuelan prisons, where PRAN leaders run entire markets inside their blocks. An inmate who controls one floor can earn more than a police commander in a year. Or Honduras, where smuggling a cell phone into a prison costs more than smuggling a car across the border. The more violent the prison, the more valuable power becomes. In some places, a prison isn't a place criminals fear. It's a place where criminals earn. And that is why crime never sleeps. Because someone always profits when it's awake. The third force, guards turn predators. People often think inmates run the danger inside prisons. But sometimes, the real danger wears a uniform. In Louisiana's Angola prison, inmates called a night shift the hunters. Because the guards didn't just enforce order, sometimes they enjoyed the chaos. In Nigeria's Kirikiri prison, guards sold weapons to inmates, then later arrested the same inmates for using them. In Sao Paulo, guards in Carandiru refused to enter the cell blocks during riots. But once the inmates surrendered, they opened fire anyway. The line between guard and predator blurs in places where the rules stop matching, where authority becomes a weapon. And when authority becomes violent, there is no safe side of the bars. The mental collapse zone. Violence can destroy the body, but isolation destroys the mind. Psychologists have documented conditions unique to Supermax prisons: time blindness, sensory derangement, phantom conversations, hypervigilance, dream leakage, when dreams feel more real than waking life. Inmates in extreme isolation report seeing heavy checkmark shadows that move, heavy checkmark faces in walls, heavy checkmark lights that pulse like breathing, heavy checkmark their own reflections, smiling back incorrectly. The scariest part is not psychosis itself, but that many inmates don't realize they're losing their minds. Some laugh for hours. Some talk to their own shadows. Some believe they're still outside, living imaginary lives day by day. A former inmate at a U.S. Supermax described it like this: your brain starts eating itself slowly. And the worst part? It feels normal. If crime never sleeps, neither does the fear of your own thoughts. The gods inside the walls. In many prisons, violence replaces religion. But in the world's most dangerous prisons, violence becomes religion. In Honduras, inmates tattoo saints holding AK-47s. In Brazil, gang members pray before riots, not for protection, but to die with honor. In the Philippines, prisoners carve talismans meant to shield them from knives. In West Africa, inmates drink potions before fights, believing they're invincible. In Haiti's National Penitentiary, guards reported an inmate who felt no pain during a beating because he'd undergone a voodoo ritual days earlier. Belief, fear, violence, and power weave together until prisons become spiritual battlegrounds. And when men believe gods are watching them kill, they stop fearing consequences. Crime never sleeps when faith fuels it. The men who will never leave. Some inmates know they will never see freedom, not because of their crimes, but because their prisons are designed to disappear them. In North Korea, entire families vanish into political camps, including children. Some grow up never knowing the outside world existed. In Myanmar, ethnic prisoners are held indefinitely with no records. Some can't remember their own birthdays. Some can't remember their own names. In Russia's Arctic penal colonies, prisoners serve sentences so long and so isolated that by the time they could be released, the outside world has changed beyond recognition. Dangerous prisons aren't only dangerous because of violence. They're dangerous because they erase people. And when a system can erase you, crime becomes the only part of you that still lives. The cycle repeats. This is why crime never sleeps. Because every dangerous prison is not the end of violence, but the beginning of the next chapter. A child whose father died in a prison riot grows up angry. A man tortured by guards joins a gang for revenge. A prisoner who escaped becomes a legend others try to imitate. A gang leader in prison for murder gains influence, not loses it. Prisons are supposed to stop crime, but in many places, they fuel it, they multiply it, they weaponize it. They evolve it. Crime becomes a cycle, a rhythm, a living thing. And living things don't sleep. The world's most dangerous prisons are more than walls and steel. They are echoes of fear, power, and the darkness that never sleeps. If this story left you questioning what lies behind those bars, make sure to like this video, share it with someone brave enough to watch, and subscribe for more journeys into the shadows of the world. Because crime never sleeps, and neither will we.